I just, I just, I just speak my peace, keep my peace.
What's good, everybody? Welcome to episode 84 of the Speak One Piece podcast. As always, I'm your gracious host, Greg Lacey. Like we always do about this time, I hope that this episode is reaching you all in good health. If it's your first time listening to the Speak One Piece podcast, welcome. If this is not, welcome back. Hopefully I'm able to retain all of your listenership because that is so important. Please share the podcast, whatever platform you decide to listen to this on, because that is definitely appreciated. I guess we can get straight into this podcast. Well, I guess before we do get into the episode, I should start with a disclaimer. Anything that I say in this episode is just my experience. I'm not encouraging you all to do anything. I'm just letting you all know that I made a decision, and this was what my experience was like. I'm not encouraging you all to follow my lead. I'm just letting you all know, just in case you may be going through the same or battling the same decisions, and you may want to carry out something. You may feel more comfortable hearing that somebody else successfully did anything. And the backstory, for those of you who don't know, you can see from the title of this episode what I'm going to be talking about. So yeah, episode 83, I told you all that, that episode was pre-recorded, almost a week prior to its release because I was getting ready to go on vacation and I didn't want to be recording over vacation, but now I'm back. As you all can see, I successfully made it back. I went on a week-long vacation and made it back safe and so far healthy, and I just want to give you all my account for what that experience was like, because I know a lot of you all, I definitely had that mind state, a mental battle, so where it was like, we've been in this pandemic for so long and I just had to get out and get away. So last week was my birthday, and for the past 4 or 5 years, actually since like my 21st birthday, if you want to count Vegas, but I've been traveling for my birthday as long as I've been able to fund it, and had the means to do so. For the past 4 or 5 years, I specifically been, making the decision to go somewhere tropical because here in California, on my birthday every year, since I've been a kid, it either rains or it's gloomy. I don't know why that is, but that's just how it has been. And for the past 4 or 5 years, I've been going to very tropical places, whether that's the Bahamas, whether that's St. Thomas, whether that's Mexico, whatever the case it may be. I've been deciding to do that. I'm just making a conscious decision to do that for my birthday to enjoy it. And so this year, obviously, there was a hurdle, considering that we're still in the midst of a pandemic, and it's not as easily available to travel to these type of places now. And so I made a decision to travel during the pandemic and take a week-long vacation for my birthday, despite the pandemic. I guess I should give you all the backstory just leading up to the decision. I told you all about me deciding to do it for my birthday, and I already had my mind made up. Like, I'm going to travel. I've been in this house for the past year, haven't really done too much, and so I think that there is a healthy way for me to carry out this task and not put anyone not to put anyone's life or health at jeopardy. And so after I made my decision I was going to travel, I started to look into, flights to find out the cheapest flights, whether I looked into Jamaica, I looked into Aruba, I looked into DR and PR, and I think I looked into Barbados. Some of these places were shut down. Some of these places, had precautions in weather to where had precautions in place to whether once you get there, you have to, quarantine for 14 days. Some of them were open. And then another thing I had to take into account was just the COVID cases. I had to look into the rises over the past 7 days, over the past 14 days, over the past month. I had to look into how they're handling COVID. I had to look into just the touristy spots. And I did that for all these places. The next thing I did was just look into testimonies, what I'm giving you all now. The first one that actually inspired me to get into all this was this blog I read from this young black man that went to Jamaica. I think it was in October. But just seeing his account for his story and seeing how he was able to navigate and do this and carry out this task, it encouraged me like, okay, there is a way to do this. And so after reading his blog and reading many other tourist blogs, I was like, okay, there are ways to carry out a task like this and not, jeopardize anyone's health and not jeopardize my health. And so the first decision I made upon my research, I guess I can say, was to go to Aruba. I made this decision probably like 2 weeks prior to my birthday, and it was really literally just an impulse buy. I was like, okay, I waited so long. I've been looking at flights for the past week, and now my birthday is almost 2 weeks away. These ticket prices are probably going to go up. And Aruba is one of the places that's open, that in the touristy areas, people are not, really getting infected with COVID. And so I've never been there either. And so I was like, okay, this is the place I want to go. The tickets aren't that much. It looks beautiful. They offer COVID testing, so I'm ready to go. So I booked my trip to COVID. I booked my trip to COVID. I booked my trip to Aruba, and upon booking my trip, I found out that JetBlue allows you to cancel trips with no fees. And this is something that hasn't happened prior to COVID. Obviously, with COVID in mind, people, changing their minds last minute, people not able to travel due to their health and things like that. This is definitely a great safety net for that. And so I booked my trip to Aruba, and usually, my girlfriend, she travels with me. This was a trip that she didn't want to take because she didn't feel comfortable with the flight length, the traveling length, because it was like going to Aruba, it was like 3 hours. And then there was a layover, or it was 3 hours from LA to Florida. There was a layover, and it was like another 3 hours plus from Florida to Aruba. So all in all, it was like 7 hour flight total going back and forth. And so she didn't feel comfortable with that. I spoke about it in previous episodes. People are dealing with COVID differently. Like in March 2021, I'm definitely dealing with it more different, more lenient than I was in March 2020. That's not to say that I'm out here being reckless, not to say I'm not out here wearing masks, and not to say I'm out here trying to infect people or jeopardizing essential workers' health. But I think just like mentally, I'm more lenient in how I operate with COVID, just because I know that I've done the right thing for the past year, so I can continue to do the right thing and, God willing, not get affected. And with me being able to move like that, I think it's very easy for me to deal with COVID. Everyone else is not dealing with it the same. And so, I didn't take that into account, but I definitely took that into account after, we had conversations about it. But, she's dealing with COVID differently than I am. And we are in the same house, so I had to take that into account. However, I was still going to travel to Aruba. This is just something about me. Like, I'm not afraid to do things alone. Like, I'm not afraid to celebrate my birthday alone, and it's no slight to anyone. I can do that and it not mean anything bad to my significant other, not mean anything bad to like my closest friends. Like, I can celebrate my birthday alone. I can travel alone. I can go to the movies alone. I can go to dinners alone, just because like that's the type of person I am. I am very comfortable in doing things like that. So I booked my trip to Aruba. She didn't book hers because she didn't feel comfortable with that. And I found out that you can cancel, so I ended up canceling it. So I had to go back to the drawing board and look into other places. And we ended up deciding on going to Cancun, Mexico. She felt more comfortable with that flight from LAX. It wasn't that long. It wasn't no longer than a 4 hour flight. The COVID cases in the very touristy areas, there wasn't that much of a spike, and this was due in large part to like majority of the resorts there, and they call it a hotel zone in Cancun. The majority of the resorts in hotel zone, they're offering COVID tests. So it put her at ease that the resort that we stayed in offered COVID testing and were readily available, the antigen and the PCR. I'm not sure if it's PCR or PRC, wherever the case may be. She felt more at ease because of that. And so we decided to end up going to Cancun, booked a trip there, and it was an all-inclusive resort. So everything that we needed, we didn't have to travel too far from. They offered, they gave us the meals, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and midnight snacks if you wanted to. They gave us free drinks. All this was free. Some of the excursions was free. The resort was right there on the shore of a beach, so we didn't have to go too far for a white sand beach. There was a pool in the resort. They offer a spa at the resort. It was just like a bunch of things that, normally you would have to travel deep into a city or deep into a country to find. And we didn't have to do that. So this was something that put her at ease. And, because of that, I felt more comfortable. Like, okay, one thing about me, one thing why I had reserves in doing it in the first place is I don't like to travel to the same place twice. Last year we went to Mexico. We didn't go to Cancun. Actually, we went close to Cancun, but we didn't go into Cancun. We docked in Costa Maya, Mexico, one day. We was on a cruise, and then the next day we docked. I forget the other place we docked, but we ended up going to Tulum. So, those places aren't too far from Cancun. They're about like 30 minutes from Cancun. And so as a result, I didn't want to be revisiting Mexico. But, we ended up deciding on going there. And it wasn't a bad decision. I can say that, returning home safely. My last 2 COVID tests has been negative. I got one more that I'm going to do today. And once I get that, then I'm going to be fine. But even just going back to the decision and going back to the hotel and everything like that, another reason why I feel comfortable making this trip, because I felt like I wasn't jeopardizing anybody's health. Like, one thing we have to think about, one thing that I always speak about myself, is just people out here being reckless and jeopardizing the health of essential workers who are just trying to make ends meet. And so prior to my flight, the week leading up to my flight, I took 2 COVID tests just to make sure that I was negative. I didn't want to be getting on an airplane and affecting these flight attendants, affecting the people who work for these airlines, just because of I wanted to enjoy myself for my birthday. Like, I feel like that would have been a reckless decision. So just to make sure that I was not doing that, I took a COVID test the week leading up, and I took a COVID test a couple days before the flight. Actually, I got my results for the COVID test that morning of the flight, just to make sure, and I timed that out perfectly. And so going into that, I definitely felt at ease. There are some places to where you have to present a negative COVID test prior to the flight, and there are some places where you don't. And Mexico is one of those places where you don't have to have a negative COVID test prior to the flight, but America is one of those places. So coming back to America, we had to have our COVID test, which is another reason why, booking a resort that had a COVID test readily available on site was a plus. But anyways, just even getting back into the experience of the airport, like, the airport wasn't at full capacity. I didn't expect it to be. The airplane itself that we rode on, that we flew on, was JetBlue. It wasn't at full capacity. The decision to book with JetBlue was based purely off of just flight rates. There are some flights and some airlines to where they're still blocking out the middle seat. So if you have to sit next to someone that you don't know, that's not from your household, that there's at least a little bit of space in between you two. Which I don't know how effective that is, but I think that I've read this this Harvard research where they're saying, like, as far as like being in places with people you don't know, and being in places with people that are not from your household, because of the ventilations and because of the cleaning measures that airlines are taking, some of these airplanes are like the safest places you can be with other people. And so that definitely put my mind at ease as well, reading this Harvard study. But JetBlue that we flew on is not one of the airlines that is blocking out the middle row. So if you think about flying places and that's something that you need, don't book JetBlue. But another reason why I did it opposed from the flight rates was just the flight capacity. Like, despite them operating fully, the plane that I booked, and I booked it last minute, so I knew that it wasn't that filled. It probably was no more than the 33% filled, which is another thing that put my mind at ease. So it may be someone in the first row, and it won't be another person for another 3 or 4 rows. And that was the case going to and from. And so that's another thing that put my mind at ease, is just like not being around a lot of people, not really worried about being affected by these people, because we are not like in vicinity with each other. So that's one thing that put my mind at ease. We got there in Mexico, enjoyed ourselves. I'm not gonna get into everything that we did in Mexico, because it's gonna make this episode long, and I didn't really plan for this episode to be that long. But I think the most compromised we may have been in Mexico was the one excursion that we booked that wasn't with the resort that we were staying there. We booked one excursion that included ATV riding in the jungle, zip lining, and then diving into cenotes. And for those of you who don't know what cenotes are, they're like those are, you can look them up, but it's like the underground rivers that form in Mexico. I don't know if Mexico is the only place that have them, but I know the most popular ones that I know are in Mexico. But I think the most compromised we may have been, as far as like being affected or being around other people, were in Mexico. I mean, not Mexico. We're during this excursion, because in order to get into this excursion, we had to ride in a van with people we didn't know. Once we got to the excursion, obviously we were still wearing our masks on things like the ATVs, but we don't know how sanitized the ATVs were. The zip lining, we wear our masks during the zip lining, but we don't know how sanitized the zip lining, the handles of the zip line, it wasn't sanitized at all, because we were just going right after each other. And then the diving in the cenotes, obviously you're not going to dive in water with a mask on. So, we were running around, everybody taking turns diving in the water and things like that. And so while you are above water, we're close to each other. We're close in proximity with each other, and we're not wearing masks. So that's probably the most compromised we may have been. And that day, or was it that day, or was that actually that morning? So we didn't take a test that day after the excursion, but we took one that morning just to make sure that up to the case, or up to that point, we had been negative. And then we left a day after that excursion. So we left a day after that excursion, got back home to LA, and then took another COVID test. And, just got my results back yesterday that was negative. So I'm going to take one more just to make sure that I am negative, to account for, the last days in Mexico. But it's the whole experience. It was fun. It was definitely something that I've needed. I've been in the house for the past year, and I just needed that escape. And like I'm already planning, mentally planning my next trip, because I have to get out. Like a lot of people, they have not been shut down since this thing started. People are still going out and clubbing. People are still going out and hanging out with friends and doing whatever the case may be. I'm not one of those people, but I definitely need some type of outlet, or I definitely need some type of relief for me to get out, and this vacation was something that I needed. And I think that even just speaking about just being reckless, I'm glad that I was like, I can't control what everyone else will do, but I'm glad that despite, me traveling during this pandemic, I wasn't out here being reckless. Like, people are going other places and, they're fighting with people, not fighting, but they're arguing with people about, whether they should wear a mask or where they should wear masks. There are people out here going partying and clubbing and doing all this just like reckless things that are putting essential workers at risk. Like the people out there in Mexico and Cancun, like there's a lot of taxi drivers that, they live for the fees that they get from driving around these tourists and the tips that they get from these tourists, and they had to put their lives at risk for their family to make ends meet for their family. I don't know that every single taxi driver has family, but I would assume the majority of them have a family. Even if they don't have a family, for themselves, they literally had to put their lives at risk just to make ends meet. And I don't know what type of person I would be to put them in a situation to where I'm infecting them just because I want to travel, for my birthday while I'm on vacation. You have to think. I had to think things like that, and I can't confirm 100% that I did not infect anyone, I should say. But I believe that I did not. Even thinking about just going back to the airlines, the flight attendants, like there are some people who are booking vacations based on not having to provide a negative COVID test because, they have not complied with the stay-at-home orders or the wearing the mask and things like that around people who you don't live with. And so they feel at ease with traveling to places that don't require negative COVID tests. And so they're going to those places and possibly affecting these flight attendants who are doing the same thing that those taxi drivers are doing. They're putting their lives on the line to make ends meet, to provide, for themselves or for their families. And again, I feel comfortable knowing that I'm not, despite that, there was a possibility that I may have affected someone or jeopardized someone's health, but I feel comfortable knowing that I did not willingly do that, and I know that, I tested to ensure that. Another thing is like, while we were out there, I overheard stories of people that, were fighting because people were telling other people to wear a mask. Like, public transportation is very big out there. Unless you rent a car, and majority of people who are going out there to Cancun, they're not renting cars. And so you have to, be in these small spaces with people. And there are people who coming from America who are arguing with people who are encouraging them to put their mask on, saying that, I don't prescribe to I think the quote that I heard was, and I didn't hear the person who actually said it, but I heard the person who heard, or the person who was said I don't prescribe to the fear doctrine, basically saying that, the only reason why people are wearing masks is out of fear and things like that. So I'm not going to wear a mask here in this foreign land, which is crazy. But there are people out there like that, because we know that there are people who still don't believe in this coronavirus. And just to think that people are operating like this and people are going into those places and probably further affecting people who don't have any option but to operate, or but to have these certain occupations because of the resources may be low as far as like the job opportunities, or this just may be a job they may have had for the past 4 or 5 years and they don't want to give it up because they are in a good space. And just think about the fact that they may be driving around someone who has been around 10, 20 people without a mask because they don't prescribe to the fear doctrine. It's just crazy. But this is America. We are a land of people who are entitled to do whatever. I'm not gonna say who are entitled, because there's only like a certain group of people who are entitled. Y'all know, if you listen to this podcast, you know who I'm speaking about. But there's only like a certain group of people who operate like that, but then they go into other countries and still operate like that and put people's lives at risk, and we can't do that. And I don't really have too much to give you all for this episode. I just want to let you all know that I traveled during a pandemic and that I made it back safe. Just because I know some people may be thinking of doing the same thing. So my encouragement for you all is do your research. If you can read a blog, if you can watch a vlog, you can do the research on the COVID cases and wherever you think about traveling, do that. Because again, there are some places that are requiring, you present a negative COVID test within the last 2 days prior to your flight. There are some places to where, like, once you get there, you have to quarantine for 14 days. And there's some places where you don't have to do it at all. And that right there should like caution you. But even if you can operate in those places and do so, with the right state of mind and not jeopardize other people's health, then do that. Because I know that, summer coming up and people want to get out, whether that's locally, domestically, or internationally. People are going to want to do that. And hopefully that, my account for what I did for my birthday helps you make a decision, or helps your decision a little easier. Because again, I made it back. I was able to operate safely, and I was able to return. So do your research on the places you want to go to. Do your research on requirements as far as COVID. Do your research on the spikes in the COVID cases. Do your research on, whether hotels or whether resorts are offering, COVID testing and things like that. Because these are things that are definitely essential in a sense of making sure that you return home safely. Because that's obviously what's most important. I think a lot of us would think, but that's one of the main caution is like, what if I go there and I'm not able to return? Or what if I go there and have to stay because I have a positive COVID test? These are things that will help you. Again, the main thing I did was I was reading people's blogs. I made sure that I took 2 tests prior to leaving. Took a test once I got there. Took a test, as soon as I got back home. And just made sure that I kept up with the precautions and the measures that I'm taking back home while I was there. So I always wore a mask, other than that one excursion I just told you all when I was swimming and things like that. But I made sure to always wear a mask. I stayed away from people. I made sure if there was a group of people and they were congregate in a certain space, I made sure to stay away from there. I made sure even when I was eating that, you can't really predict, where you are in regards to the proximity of other people when you're eating, but make sure that, I felt comfortable in the places that I was seated. And again, I was able to return home safely. And if you are, contemplating the same decision, take these same measures and even get more intensive with those measures. But there is a safe way to do that, and I am definitely an example of that. And carry it out. And that's really all I have for the Speak on Peace podcast this week. This was a short one. Next week, we're going to get back to the regular limps. I got a lot to talk about, but I just want to make sure that I give you all my story, my testimony of my past week, and let you all know that there is a safe way to do this. Before we do get out of here, my what to watch for this week is The Brooklyn Saints on Netflix. Once again, my what to watch for this week is The Brooklyn Saints on Netflix. My best kept secret for this week is Jealous by Mahalia featuring Rico Nasty. Once again, my best kept secret for this week is Jealous by Mahalia featuring Rico Nasty. That's the Speaking of Peace podcast for this week. Make sure you are subscribing no matter what platform you're listening to on, whether that's Google, Apple, Spotify, SoundCloud, whatever the case may be. Subscribe. If you're listening on YouTube or if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe. I definitely appreciate all of it. Share the podcast as well. That's all I have for the Speaking of Peace podcast this week. Once again, thank you all for tuning in. I'm out.